crashing as the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launch illuminated the night above. ABC senior national correspondent Matt Gutman with the moment confusion set in.
Oh my God.
Tonight, new images surfacing of California going haywire.
What the hell is that?
That mysterious contrail, liftoff of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket sailing smoothly into the Friday night sky.
Wow, what is
The
that?
sight so mesmerizing that some motorists couldn't keep their eyes out of the sky and on the road.
This guy is not paying attention.
And even after those three cars crashed, the narrator in this video barely skips a beat. He just keeps talking about that shape in the sky.
Wow, what is that?
The rocket's unusual whale-shaped contrail feeding a frenzy.
This is
If you're wondering, that bright thing in the sky was a missile launch.
And so many were wondering.
No, dude, what is that?
So many didn't get the message that the hashtag aliens trended on Twitter. Calls flooded TV stations with UFO sightings. And the man who created the mess? Elon Musk jokingly capping it this way. Nuclear alien UFO from North Korea.
Now, the next Falcon 9 launch isn't until later next month. We're not sure it'll be quite as spectacular as the last one, but the California Highway Patrol hopes that this time all these motorists will keep their eyes on the road. Tom.
Drivers be warned.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
All these motorists will keep their eyes on the road. Tom.
Drivers be warned.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
All these motorists will keep their eyes on the road. Tom.
Drivers be warned.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
All these motorists will keep their eyes on the road. Tom.
Drivers be warned.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
Let's see, let me pull up this Discord real quick. From riding Starship to the moon.
3, everyone say, Tim's going to the moon.
Tim's going to the moon. Riding Starship to the moon.
3, everyone say, Tim's going to the moon.
Tim's going to the moon!
Because I'm literally a crew member of Jim Moon. Yeah.
So, I'm going to the moon. Literally, I'm going to go to the moon. And that is absolutely as ridiculous as it sounds, but I'm literally going to fly around the moon. To the moon. And I genuinely still can't believe it. Like, it still hasn't even sunk in yet. And I've known for quite a while, but I've been chosen as one of the crew members for the Dear Moon mission. I wanted to make a video to make the announcement here alongside the official Dear Moon press releases that maybe you've seen by now, or maybe you're Googling right now, but I also wanted to maybe help answer a few questions that you guys might have. For those of you unfamiliar with Dear Moon, let me fill you in real quick. It was initially announced in early 2017 from SpaceX that they were going to fly someone around the moon on their Crew Dragon capsule on a Falcon Heavy rocket. Ironically, or maybe perhaps a little bit poetically, this announcement is what actually got me started making videos on YouTube. Yeah, that's right, my very first video on YouTube that I ever published of me standing in front of a camera explaining something about spaceflight was about this announcement. Back then, we didn't know who would purchase this ride, but come 2018, the project had shifted, and it was announced that Japanese entrepreneur Yusaku Maezawa, or MZ, had purchased the flight, and it had been upgraded to SpaceX's upcoming Starship rocket. I was actually at that press conference at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne when we learned about MZ and his vision to send creative individuals from all walks of life to the moon as a way to inspire and unite. If you haven't watched that announcement from 2018, it's beautiful, and the vision is absolutely
That should be better.
It literally brought a tear to my eye at the time. Come early 2021, and Dear Moon made a public call for applications, and despite me not really ever thinking I want to go, that's not been my thing. That's not the reason I do this channel, is to try to get to space or anything. I don't know. I just honestly felt like I couldn't pass up this opportunity.
Perfect.
So I submitted a video, and then I waited. Next thing you know, there were a handful of interviews, followed by a thorough medical checkout, and an in-person meeting with the final pool of candidates. And each step of the way, I kind of got a lot more comfortable with the Dear Moon team and learned just how committed and thoughtful they were to this entire selection process. And then there was one final interview, but it was actually just a call to tell me that I was chosen to be part of the crew. Honestly, I was shocked, kind of like I still am all this time later, but I also didn't really have my hopes up during any of this process. I've always just kind of gone into it one step at a time. Even during the medical checkouts and the final selections, I just kept telling myself to not get too excited. And to be honest, I'm still kind of in that mindset. I'm trying to stay focused on what I'm doing now, and I'll think more about Dear Moon as we get into training and as the mission gets closer.
Oh wow!
Some of us even had the opportunity to see MZ launch to the International Space Station 1 year ago, and that was absolutely amazing. Now, I've been to tons and tons of launches, literally dozens, but this one was surreal to me. I had just published that 1 hour and 40-minute long history of Soviet rocket engines video, so I was already engrossed in all this former Soviet spaceflight history. So to see these engines and rockets that I just spent 2 years of my life researching, and then to see MZ and Yozo launch on top of Soyuz, it was honestly already a life highlight for me. But what I'm most excited about is being able to bring you guys along on the ride with me as best as I possibly can. My mission on this trip is to help share our experiences with you, potentially even through some live streams, maybe, and if they go well. And I'm gonna be here to help answer all your questions to the best of my ability. Now, I'm not going to be able to answer every question, especially when it comes to training and schedules and timing and things of that nature. But when it comes to rocket science and the engineering involved, I'll be here to help make this all as digestible as I can. I can't wait for you guys to get to know this wonderful crew. It's an incredible group of people, and I'm genuinely, sincerely so honored to be with them.
This is
I cannot wait to see what a flight around the moon inspires this talented and passionate group of people to do. And no offense to the Apollo astronauts, who of course I love and admire so deeply. But they had a mission. They had to land on the moon, and that was their whole thing. They weren't there to just soak it in and share their experience with everyone. They were there to land on the moon. I can't wait to see what happens when this many people from different parts of the world with different, perspectives and beliefs and just everything, when we come together and experience something like this, what is that going to be like? It's going to be beautiful. And for me personally, I've got some really cool videos planned for my journey around the moon. And hopefully they'll help the average person not only understand spaceflight a little bit better, but also it helps them appreciate the magnificence of our delicate little existence amongst the vastness of our universe. And don't worry, in the meantime, I'll still be making videos. And in fact, I'm in the process of making a few of them as we speak, and there's tons of exciting stuff coming up, including the first orbital launch.
So, this was supposed to be another meeting.
Oh, God.
You see, all three men had understood that certain gases ignite, and that the thermos flask permits you to store vast quantities of those gases safely in the frozen liquid form until you want to ignite them, at which point you take the top off the flask, the gases evaporate, you apply a light, and boom. Now, two gases do that better than any other, and it was Obert's assistant who put them together most efficiently. His name was Werner von Braun, and the two gases that he released from his particular version of a thermos flask, the one lying on its side behind me now, were hydrogen and oxygen. If you release those two gases into a confined space with a hole at the other end of it, and mix them as you do so, and then set light to them, you get that. Destination, the moon or Moscow. The planets or Peking.
That's amazing. Like, it really is.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters.
I want to play the Artemis one, though.
Initiate.
Oh, come on. Let me make this smaller. Oh, there's no link. That's alright, we could just do this.
8, 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust quiet here in the loose and mission. Downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the...
Wow. That is like so freaking cool, man. That is so freaking cool. Put up the video. Maybe try playing a little bit Okay, yeah, I'm down for that.
I have a college essential that every student can use.
Let's see. Project Mercury, Apollo 15 remastered. Homemade documentary, extra Apollo 14, Icy Chatter. Project Mercury. Apollo 16 remastered.
I just want to, at this point, thank these people for certainly their patience. I mean, could it have dragged on a little longer?
Dragged on a little longer. That dude is like so old. Mercury program documentary at the top. Go back. Mercury program project. Yep. Mercury program documentary. Project Mercury.
(1943),
World War II
and
around
across
our
the
house
world,
is like a very
the
touchy
Second World
subject.
War rages on.
Oh, what the heck happened?
Greece, Albania, and France. Germany's land forces have managed this largely due to the fact that they have fully embraced mechanization. Fast-moving tanks and motorized infantry, air support, recon, speed. It is such a revolutionary shift away from traditional trench warfare that it earns its own name: Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. But by 1943, the situation approaches a stalemate and begins to turn against the Axis powers. In the West, Germany is unable to single-handedly overcome the combined defensive efforts of the Royal Navy and the RAF. And despite tactical successes of her submarines in the North Atlantic, the English Channel and the waters of the Western world remain largely under British control. In the East, Germany's armies have become locked in a protracted land war with the Soviet Union. At one time, advanced units of the Wehrmacht were within mere miles of Moscow. With millions dying in the Battle of Stalingrad, Germany is forced for the first time to fight defensively. With her armies now unable to overcome this situation, Germany now seeks to exploit the one advantage it still has: technology, in the hopes that the development of so-called wonder weapons will one day overcome the logistical nightmare she finds herself in. In German-occupied Norway, heavy water plants are utilized as part of an initiative towards making the world's first atomic fission weapon. Under Operation Eisbar, Germany would deploy against England the world's first ever cruise missile, a flying drone known as the V-1. Powered by a pulse jet, it is able to deliver an 850-kilogram explosive warhead to civilian areas in the United Kingdom. Finally, a separate research program under Walter Dornberger had, throughout the 1930s, been developing a series of vertically launched, inertially guided ballistic missiles known as the aggregate rockets. By 1943, the Aggregate 4 design had proven itself capable enough for military use. Its production model would be called the V-2, and it would become the world's first weaponized launch vehicle. Over 3,000 V-2s would be launched against Allied targets, but several flights would occur outside of military use, primarily sponsored by the program's technical director and vehicle designer, 31-year-old Wernher von Braun. One such launch was vehicle MW-18-014, which was flown vertically throughout the entire ascent phase to maximize the vehicle's peak altitude. It achieved an apogee of 176 kilometers, or 109.3 miles above the surface of the Earth, becoming the first man-made object to reach outer space. None of these last-ditch efforts turned the tide for Nazi Germany. But the technologies that had been developed are hungrily eyed by the Allied intelligence agencies. And as the post-war world is carved into capitalist and communist spheres of influence, so too is the intelligentsia of the German military-industrial complex. Many of these projects, including the production of V1 and V2 weapons, employ slave labor drawn from the massive infrastructure of concentration camps built by Nazi Germany during the war. Complicit in the system that committed the 20th century's worst atrocities against humanity, the scientists and engineers that had developed these wonder weapons were now at the mercy of the Allies who now stood victorious. Many German scientists and military officials knew they stood a chance for a better life in the West, and as the end of the war in Europe closed in, purposefully sought surrender with British or American units. Von Braun and his team collected blueprints, manifests, and documents from the program before they could be destroyed by the SS, and hid them, to be used as bargaining chips for asylum with the Allies. By September of 1946, Operation Paperclip was in full swing. Over 1,200 German officials involved in wonder weapon projects were granted offers they couldn't refuse: asylum and work in the United States, in exchange for a full pardon of their involvement in World War II. In October, the Soviet Union commences a similar operation, in which 2,200 German specialists are rounded up and deported eastward for work inside the Iron Curtain. Both the United States and the Soviet Union would go to great lengths to protect the identities of their respective German personnel, in some cases even thwarting efforts to bring certain individuals to justice, including operations conducted by Mossad, the intelligence and special operations agency of a brand new country in the world, Israel. Deep inside the continental United States, tests are conducted on captured V2s. It is a weapon system unlike anything America has ever seen.
Reaching a speed of 3,000 miles an hour, the rocket climbs vertically for 60 miles before beginning its descent. It's been known to reach England 5 minutes after launching from the Netherlands over 200 miles away.
Wow. That's crazy.
Von Braun and his team are sent to Huntsville, Alabama, and between 1946 and 1951, 67 captured V2s are fired from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico as part of a U.S. Army initiative to develop vehicle-mobile long-range field rockets. Some of these V2s are launched as part of Project Bumper, which tests a new concept developed by JPL called staging, the approach of stacking multiple rockets. The first stage delivers a certain amount of speed and altitude, at which point it runs out of fuel and is purposefully jettisoned. The upper stage, having been delivered to this point and still fully fueled, can ignite its own engine and proceed onward, now unencumbered by the mass of the first stage's heavy fuel tanks and large engine.
That's where that came from.
Staging is the basic principle upon which modern launch vehicles continue to operate. The final two V2s launched as part of Project Bumper utilized a brand new long-range testing facility on the Atlantic Ocean. Located in Florida, The Cape Canaveral Joint Long-Range Proving Ground allows the testing of larger, longer-range missile designs. Von Braun and his team developed the V-2 into the PGM-11 Redstone missile, capable of carrying the 4-megaton W-39 nuclear warhead to a distance of 325 kilometers in the span of just 10 minutes. Like the V-2, liquid oxygen and an alcohol-water mixture are used as fuel. But with America's military primarily interested in high-speed aircraft, the development of missile technology stagnates. Von Braun, ever eager to continue pushing the outside of the envelope, publishes several articles in Collier's magazine and even helps produce public awareness documentaries about the potential of spaceflight in conjunction with the Walt Disney Company.
Now here's a model my design for a 4-stage orbital rocket ship. Compared to the unmanned instrument rocket, it is quite large, but the overall size and weight of the rocket is mainly determined by the 11 tons weight of this top section. This weight dictates the amount of fuel and the numbers of motors needed to produce enough power to equalize the gravitational pull of the Earth.
In 1952, the International Council of Scientific Unions, one of the world's oldest international bodies, announces that the 1957 to 1958 period of solar maximum, the peak of the 11-year-long solar cycle, would coincide with an international scientific project known as the Geophysical Year. This was an effort designed to promote healthy peacetime competition in the wake of the Cold War, and simultaneously promote global interest in Earth sciences. Not many in the US and USSR take the Geophysical Year seriously. But when, on March 5, 1953, the premier of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, dies, the ascension of Nikita Khrushchev that September opens the door for a slight thaw. By 1955, the Eisenhower administration announces that the United States would participate in the International Geophysical Year by attempting to launch the world's first Earth-circling satellite.
It is like nothing else so much, in my mind, as the radar room in a big battleship or some other complex thing that really is entirely beyond my comprehension, but is still capable of exciting my wonderment.
By then, it was well understood that, at least on paper, a rocket sufficiently powerful enough could deliver a payload to an altitude above the atmosphere, and then push it to such a high speed so as to strike a perfect mathematical balance. The forward momentum of the object being so great as to equal the pull of Earth's gravity, achieving a state of gravitational limbo as the object's horizontal velocity causes it to constantly fall past the Earth, a state of permanent freefall, arcing over the horizon at 7,800 meters per second. Orbit. Once the object achieves this velocity in space, there is practically no air resistance to slow it down. This means achieving orbit at a sufficiently high altitude would allow large enough missiles to deliver vehicles and payloads into a relatively stable state. Once something enters orbit, it can continue to stay there for a significant amount of time without consuming any further propellant. This fact leads to a brand new concept in human knowledge: the artificial satellite. This is exactly the kind of opportunity von Braun had been hoping for. He gives a passionate pitch to the Eisenhower administration to let him and the Army ballistic missile team utilize a modified prototype Redstone missile called the Jupiter-C to launch the world's first satellite. American chemist Mary Sherman Morgan had, at the direction of von Braun, developed a new type of rocket fuel called hydine, a combination of 60% unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and 40% diethylnitriamine. This fuel, when burned with liquid oxygen, does not rise to the same temperature as alcohol, and therefore does not need to be cut with water. This improves the rocket's performance by 8%. And this modification, combined with small solid upper stages, would be enough to put a small mass into orbit. But von Braun is flatly rejected by the Eisenhower administration. Eisenhower wants the world's first satellite to be put there by a rocket developed by Americans, not Germans. Also, the Jupiter C's unavoidable relation to the Redstone field missile, and by extension, the V-2, could be interpreted as a militarization of space. There were just too many liabilities. The contract instead goes to the Navy, which develops the Vanguard launch vehicle. The extra time needed in developing a whole new rocket from the ground up concerns few in the United States. The Russians are obviously behind in rocket development, or so the Eisenhower administration had thought. In May of 1957, the Soviet Union tests a new missile of their own, the R-7 Semyorka. It is a massive rocket unlike any the world has ever witnessed, the brainchild of two geniuses, vehicle designer Sergei Korolev and lead engineer Valentin Glushko. Together with the Soviet team of German scientists, these two have made the world's first ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, capable of throwing a nuclear warhead over a distance of 5,000 miles, nearly 9,000 kilometers. No one in the West is given forewarning when, on October 4th, 1957, an R-7 Semyorka launches a 184-pound metal sphere with 4 antennas called Sputnik.
Man stands on the threshold of outer space. It's the biggest story of the year, possibly the #1 story of the century. This launching of the Russian satellite, which brings into the realm of possibility all those wild science fiction stories of interplanetary travel. Watch it. It's fascinating. This animation is a graphic portrayal of how a satellite operates. This story of the Russian satellite burst upon a startled world early in October. Russia announcing she had shot a man-made moon 560 miles into space, where it was circling the Earth at the dizzy speed of 18,000 miles per hour. It sent its familiar beep-beep back to Earth. It was tracked by radio and by sight as it hurtled across the heavens.
The Soviet Union had beaten the United States in the International Geophysical Year's Earth Satellite Project. Literally overnight, the worldwide perception of power and technology shifts in Russia's favor for the first time in the Cold War. Many in the US see it as an all-out crisis. Anyone can tune into Sputnik's beeping as it passes over the continental United States, and people to this day still claim to have seen it with their own eyes. Sputnik's relatively tiny 58-centimeter diameter makes this highly improbable. What most people actually observe is the depleted core stage of the R-7 as it orbits alongside the small satellite. It is nearly 50 times bigger than the tiny metal ball. Less than a month later, on November 3rd, a second Soviet satellite, Sputnik 2, places the first living object in orbit, a stray mongrel from the streets of Moscow named Laika. That December, the Navy's Vanguard launch vehicle was ready, and America's official response to Sputnik had been cleared for liftoff. The press called it Kaputnik. It had been a double slap in the face for the Eisenhower administration, and the United States looked undeniably inept in the field of burgeoning rocket technology. Von Braun, who had already made his doubts clear about the Vanguard hardware, promises Eisenhower that with the green light, he can put an American satellite into orbit within 60 days. A desperate Eisenhower finally gives the go-ahead, and by February of 1958, von Braun places a JPL-designed satellite dubbed Explorer 1 atop a Jupiter C ballistic missile. This small satellite is packed with 4 science experiments, including instruments to measure micrometeorite impacts, acoustic detectors, temperature sensors, and an omnidirectional Geiger-Müller tube to measure proton and electron radiation. This suite of scientific instrumentation is put together by Dr. James Van Allen of the University of Iowa. February 1st, 1958. Explorer 1 takes off.
later, Explorer is in orbit, broadcasting to the world its coded scientific data. This close-up of the United States edition of Sputnik was made at a press conference with leaders of the scientific teams, Dr. Werner von Braun, Dr. James Van Allen, and Dr. William Pickering. A three-way collaboration between private industry, academic science, and the military. Cosmic ray intensity, meteor impact, solar radiation. These are the dry facts that will help carry man ever farther into the age of space.
Explorer 1 becomes America's first satellite in orbit. Its scientific instruments shed light on the existence of localized bands of radiation existing at high orbit altitudes, which soon become named the Van Allen belts. The International Geophysical Year, the public catalyst for which all of this was officially pursued, quickly becomes overshadowed and forgotten in the face of what soon becomes known as the space race, as both countries bolster their efforts to continue missile development. And with the launch of a dog aboard Sputnik 2, it was clear to many in the Eisenhower administration that human spaceflight was Russia's next obvious goal. The director of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, Hugh Dryden, makes the case for an American national research program to develop space technology, stating, "It is of great urgency and importance to our country, both from consideration of our prestige as a nation as well as military necessity, that this challenge of Sputnik be met by an energetic program of research and development for the conquest of space." The United States House of Representatives creates a select committee on astronautics and space exploration, which soon drafts what will become the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. Signed into law by President Eisenhower, this federal statute abolishes the NACA, merging its responsibilities into a brand new, much larger, and more centralized agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. NASA is born. This new member of the executive branch is charged with several objectives, but the first three are the most important. 1. The expansion of human knowledge of phenomena in the atmosphere and space. 2. The improvement of the usefulness, performance, speed, safety, and efficiency of aeronautical and space vehicles. 3. The development and operation of said vehicles capable of carrying instruments, equipment, supplies, and living organisms through space. NASA's holistic purpose is to bring the various isolated aeronautical development programs scattered across the U.S. together under a single federal umbrella, in order to avoid the unnecessary duplication or competition of American effort, facilities, and equipment. It is one of the largest centralizations of American government in the 1950s. Setting policy and direction for this new agency would be the National Aeronautics and Space Council, a collection of individuals from the highest echelons of government and aerospace research. Chaired by the President himself, other members would include the Secretaries of State and Defense, the Chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, and the newly appointed Administrator of NASA, Thomas Keith Glennan. Glennan presides over an organization that had absorbed the earlier NACA, its 8,000 employees, an annual budget of $100 million, nearly $880 million in today's money, and 3 major laboratories. The Langley Aeronautical Lab, now the Langley Research Center, located on the Chesapeake Bay in Hampton, Virginia. The Ames Research Center at Moffett Federal Airfield in what is now Silicon Valley. And finally, the Lewis Flight Research Center, located in Brook Park, Ohio. Over the next 2 years, Glennan would oversee the absorption of further laboratories and research centers.
Yep, the NASA
By 1960, NASA would assume responsibility of several programs that started as Army, Navy, Air Force, or DoD projects.
It's like one city over.
This includes such offices as DARPA and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. NASA quickly balloons into a big tent agency, assuming responsibility for and sharing information between the various existing laboratories nationwide, as well as constructing new ones, such as the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. The most pressing and imminent issue that now faces this new agency is manned spaceflight. NASA's first priority: put a man into space before the Soviet Union. To this end, Glennon organizes a cabal of senior engineers, an aggregate of talent and knowledge pooled from the various laboratories across the country. This collection of 45 are known as the Space Task Group. It is up to them to decide precisely how America will launch the world's first astronaut. The leader of the Space Task Group is Robert Gilruth, who, before NASA, was working on hypersonic missiles at the NACA. Other notable members include Chris Kraft and Glenn Lunny. Although not part of the original 45, more notable members would join in the next 2 years, the most famous being a 27-year-old Gene Kranz. Notably absent from this group, Wernher von Braun.
I reported to the Langley Research Center. I was never interviewed for the job. Sat in basically a bullpen for about 2 weeks. And a gentleman comes up, taps me in the shoulder and says, "I'm Chris Kraft, you're working for me now. I want you to go down to the Cape, write a countdown, write some mission rules, and when you're through, give me a call and we'll launch." I could put the piece together. I knew there had to be a spacecraft, that's over at Hangar S, and you go down the launch pad, there's a booster down there. I knew a bit about range safety from Holloman, where we were, so I could go over and find range safety. So there's a question of pulling these people together.
The most influential member of this group is mechanical engineer Max Faget.
Just not joining the stream.
His research leads him to the work of one Harry Julian Allen, who in 1952 was testing various types of shapes for warheads at hypersonic flight. His tests led to the formulation of the blunt body principle. Of the 3 possible methods of returning to Earth from space, those being ballistic, skip, and glide, he came to the conclusion that a blunt, non-lifting, high-drag projectile-like vehicle was both the simplest to design and most reliable to control. This radical departure from the streamlined aircraft approach, such as the X-15, is based on the fact that a blunt body would produce an extremely large disturbance in the atmosphere, known as a bow shock, which could carry away up to 90% of the friction heat generated by the hypersonic speed. While deceleration g-forces would be high, on paper, the ballistic vehicle was a practical, man-carrying machine. All that would be required was to develop a material that could somehow protect the...
42 seconds in. I'm actually going to leave this up so that I can watch it later. Man, you've been super awesome. Thank you guys for joining my stream. Thank you guys for watching. Definitely kudos to Spitfire 08. Definitely this has been super cool, man. My wife's going to be definitely interested in this. Maybe I can get her to come down here and watch with us on the stream. That would be so awesome. You're the man, dude. Thank you so much, man. I'm so interested. I will definitely 100%. I will hit you up on Discord and let you know when I'm going to be back on. Tomorrow's Friday. I usually jump on Fridays after work about 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I will definitely be letting you know when I jump back on, man. You're a blessing. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like the stream, and maybe when I jump on, it'll just automatically notify you. Have a good night, guys. Thank